Dewey or don't we? Mr. Jupiter's students loved their Thursday morning library visits. They checked out books, listened to stories on tape, and learned about the Dewey Decimal System, gushed Miss Turner. Not only is it an ingenious way of organizing all human knowledge, but it's fun too. Lenny Whittier and Bruce Vanderbanter, however, had another reason for loving library time: International Geographic. Plucking the latest issue from the magazine rack, they huddled in the easy to read section and pored over its pages. Thrilling, titillating, downright naughty, the boys had discovered the magazines last year. For weeks they had hidden behind bookshelves and tittered over photographs of Tahitian men in grass skirts, tattooed dogs, and Bavarian horns. Too soon, however, the school year and their magazine time had ended. Impatiently, the boys had waited for fall and the new issues. Now they turned to photograph of a topless tribal woman. Lenny snickered. Bruce giggled. Miss Turner cleared her throat. What are you boys doing back there? Lenny tried to cover the picture with his arm. Nothing, he stammered. Yeah, added Bruce, nothing. Miss Turner put out her hand. The boys couldn't help noticing the magenta polish on her well-sculpted nails. They glanced at each other. Since when did Miss Turner do her nails? Hand me that magazine, said the librarian. Reluctantly, Lenny surrendered it. Miss Turner looked from the photograph to the red-faced boys. She rolled her eyes. If you two aren't old enough to appreciate the infinite beauty of our world and its varied cultures, then you're not old enough to read this magazine. But we weren't reading it, said Lenny. We were just looking at the pictures, said Bruce. Miss Turner bit her lip and put on her stern librarian's face. Now come and join the rest of the class in the reading nook. We're having our lesson on the Dewey Decimal System. For the next 15 minutes, Miss Turner chirped and bubbled about the Dewey Decimal System. The system was invented by the brilliant librarian Melville Dewey. It is based on 10 broad categories such as 100 to 199, philosophy and psychology; 200 to 299, religion; 300 to 399 or 399, social sciences, and so on. Each broad category divides into 9 subcategories, spanning at range from 10 to 90. Each subcategory is further divided into 9 specialized topics, ranging from 1 to 9. Decimals are added to break the topics down even further. Isn't that fascinating? The children yawned. But don't take my word for it, she continued. Take theirs. Up popped a hand puppet, wearing a flowered bathing trunks and carrying a surfboard. Cowabunga, dude, said the puppet in a voice that sounded very much like Mr. Jupiter's. The children blinked. A second puppet appeared. This one had sharp teeth and a fin attached to its back. It slunk toward the surfer puppet. I'm in trouble, dudes, cried the surfer puppet. Quick, tell me what tool I would use to find information on repelling a shark. None of the children answered. Tell me, the surfer puppet shouted as the shark swam closer. Still nobody answered. Please, screamed the surfer puppet. Bernadette finally said, the Dewey Decimal System? You're right, Dudette, cried the surfer puppet. But the shark pounced. You're too late. Ah! The puppets wrestled their way out of sight. The children clapped. Then 2 new puppets popped up. One was a little old lady with a big nose. The other was a little old man with a bigger nose. Oh, Punch, cried the little old lady. Yes, Judy, answered the little old man. I have a surprise for you, said Judy. Then give it to me, said Punch. Whack! Judy smacked Punch over the head with a broom. Ouch! Shouted Punch. He turned to the children. It looks as if I need to learn about head injuries. How can I find the information? The school nurse, suggested Amisha. The internet, suggested Ashley Z. I know, cried Missy. The Dewey Decimal System. You'd use the Dewey Decimal System. Hooray! Exclaimed Punch. I'm saved. That's what you think, screeched Judy, and she chased Punch off stage. The children clapped and laughed as a penguin puppet popped up. What tool would I use to find information about refrigeration? It asked. The Dewey Decimal System! The children cried. Now, a Benjamin Franklin puppet popped up. What can help me find books about electricity? The Dewey Decimal System! The children cried again. Now, a sumo wrestler puppet popped up. What system can help me find books about diaper rash? The Dewey Decimal System! Cried the children, yet again. Then Miss Turner and all the puppets burst into song. Numbers, numbers in a row, tell us where nonfiction goes. The children joined in. Give us facts, give us rules, the Dewey Decimal System's so cool. With each verse, they grew louder and more enthusiastic until everyone was clapping and laughing and cheering for the Dewey Decimal System. Everyone, that is, except Lenny and Bruce. I don't get it, whispered Lenny. Me either. Bruce whispered back. Shh, hissed Stanford. I can't hear what she's saying. Miss Turner looked toward Lenny and Bruce. Join the fun, she urged. But the boys didn't think the Dewey Decimal System was all that fun. Not even when Miss Turner cried, Do you know about the Dewey Decimal System? And everyone replied, Dewey, Dewey, boy, Dewey. That was the best library lesson ever, Stanford declared minutes later as the fourth graders lined up to head back to class. Lenny pretended to gag. Bruce pretended to choke. And Miss Turner sighed. She turned to Mr. Jupiter, and for the first time since meeting him, forgot to bat her eyelashes. I wish I could find some way to spark those two's interest. I wish I could turn them into Dewey whizzes. Mr. Jupiter nodded. When I worked at the Transylvania Elementary, I had the same problem with the son of a local count. The boy just couldn't sink his teeth into the subject. He patted her hand, and the librarian almost swooned. I'm sure you'll think of something. The following Thursday, Lenny and Bruce headed straight for the magazine rack. But the International Geographics were gone, gasped Lenny. Yes, said Miss Turner, I've hidden them. Hidden? Said Bruce. Actually, explained Miss Turner, I've shelved them using the Dewey Decimal System. Huh? Grunted the boys. Ordinarily, I wouldn't shelve books and magazines together, continued Miss Turner, but in order to show you how wonderfully versatile the system is, I've taken a few liberties. Huh? The boys grunted again. You see, Miss Turner went on, I've matched information on the inside of the magazine with its corresponding Dewey Decimal number, thus finding the perfect place for them on the bookshelves. If you want to read them, you'll have to find them. Pivoting on the heels of her strappy sandals, she sashayed away. Only the scent of her new perfume lingered. Bruce sighed with disappointment. I guess I'm back to reading books. Not so fast, said Lenny. I'm not about to be beaten by a librarian. He trolled up and down the aisles of the bookshelves, his eyes flicking right and left. For the first time ever, he noticed the numbers on the spines of each book. He noticed the corresponding numbers on the end of each bookshelves. Are those Dewey Decimal numbers? He asked Bruce. I think so, said Bruce. Huh, said Lenny. I'm beginning to see the connection. He swept past books about space and time, Dewey Decimal numbers 114 and 115, past books about religion, Dewey Decimal number 200, past books about criminal law, 345, and railroad transportation, 385, and aha, there, wedged in with books about customs, etiquette, and folklore, 390, was a stack of International Geographics. I get it, said Bruce. Some of the magazine articles are about life in other countries, their special customs. Clever of her, said Lenny, but not clever enough. The two crouched behind the new book section and opened a magazine to an article about Bikini Island. From across the room, Miss Turner watched and smiled. The next Thursday, Lenny and Bruce dashed to 390, but they've been reshelved, said Miss Turner. The boys groaned. Ugh, isn't the Dewey Decimal System just wonderful? Chirped the librarian. It's so flexible. And so confusing, groaned Lenny. Not really, replied Miss Turner. Not if you have a chart. And she pointed to a poster on the wall. On it was listed the entire Dewey Decimal System. The boys studied it a moment. Then they started searching. Languages of East and Southeast Asia, 495. Gas mechanics, 533. Microbiology, 576. Where can they be? Wailed Lenny. How about zoology? Suggested Bruce. Those magazines have lots of articles about animals in them. Good idea, said Lenny. What's the decimal number for zoology? 591, said Stanford, who was walking past. The boys made a beeline for the bookshelf, then spent the rest of the library time giggling behind biographies. The next Thursday, Bruce pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket. They knew Miss Turner would have reshelved the International Geographics, and they were ready. Earlier, they had made a list of categories the magazine might be shelved under. Now they split up. Lenny headed for birds, 598, nothing. Bruce dashed towards human anatomy, 611, nada. Lenny found his way to agriculture, 630, zip. Where can they be? Asked Bruce. When they'd crossed the last topic off their list, he sighed in defeat. That was when Miss Turner appeared. Did you boys read that article about the Taj Mahal? She asked. It was absolutely fascinating. Lenny looked at Bruce. Bruce looked at Lenny. That's it, they cried in unison. They found the magazine shelved under buildings 690. Victoriously, they pulled the magazines down just as Mr. Jupiter clapped his hands. Everyone line up! Rotten luck, growled Lenny, and he put the magazines back. The following Thursday, Miss Turner had a surprise for the fourth graders. Instead of checking out books, she said, we're going to play the Dewey Decimal game. The winner will receive a special prize. Miss Turner explained the rules. Each student would be asked a question about the Dewey Decimal System. If the student answered correctly, he would remain standing. If the student answered incorrectly, she would be asked to sit down. The last student left standing would be the winner. Stanford turned to Lenny and Bruce. I bet you wished you'd paid closer attention now, he said. Lenny shrugged. Who needed to pay attention when he could use the chart? He glanced toward it, and his heart sank. Miss Turner had taken the poster down. Bruce had noticed, too. We're going to be the first kids out, he groaned. The boys dragged themselves to their feet as Miss Turner shuffled through a stack of index cards and read the first question. Under what number would you find a book about tetherball, Jackie? Jackie didn't hesitate. 796, she answered. Correct, said Miss Turner. Woo, 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 whooped Calvin and Humphrey, and they pumped their fists in the air. Rachel, said Miss Turner, this question is for you. A book about public speaking can be found under what number? Rachel said. No, I'm sorry, said Miss Turner. The number is 791. Woo, 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 whooped Calvin and Humphrey again. Miss Turner turned to Lenny. Beads of sweat broke out on his forehead. Tell me, said Miss Turner, under what number would you find a book about customs, etiquette, and folklore? Lenny couldn't believe his luck. She'd ask him something he knew. 390, he said with confidence. The answer is 390. Miss Turner nodded and smiled, then looked at Bruce. Books about zoology can be found where? 591, shouted Bruce. Correct, said Miss Turner. And I like your enthusiasm, she smiled at Mr. Jupiter. He smiled back. And so the game went. Question after question, answer after answer, student after student after student. Ashley A and Ashley B and Ashley Z went down in the second round, but not Lenny or Bruce. Jackie went down in the fourth round, but not Lenny or Bruce. Amisha, Missy, Victoria, and Lil all went down in the sixth round, but not Lenny or Bruce. By the 10th round, only Stanford, Lenny, and Bruce remained standing. Stanford, said Miss Turner. Where would I find a book about buildings? Stanford shot the other two a triumphant look before answering. 328. No, I'm sorry, that's incorrect, said Miss Turner. Does either of you boys know? 690, they cried in unison. Miss Turner grinned. I declare this contest a tie, she said. And now for your prize. And she reached behind her desk and pulled out a stack of International Geographics, whooped Bruce. Geography and Travel 910, added Lenny. Then together the boys cried, Do we know about the Dewey Decimal System? Dewey, 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 boy, Dewey. Moral. Necessity is the mother of invention.